Hi, my name is Janet Pratt Morgan. I'm a mom of 8. I'm a children's book illustrator, and my brand new book, Hannah Lee and the Week of Dreams, is coming out this week. Actually, it came out a couple days ago. I really wanted to do something this week to kind of celebrate the release of the book, and I thought about a couple different ideas. I thought about maybe doing a read aloud, I thought about doing a Q&A, but I ended up landing on the idea of talking about a bit of like behind the scenes, in particular creature design and like world building, and also just in like how I designed the book, decisions I made in the formatting and with the different editions and stuff like that. So yeah, one of the things that this book has is lots and lots of creatures, as you can probably tell by the cover. I really like pulling in fairy tale and folktale elements in my books, but I don't like to be married too closely to a particular image of any folktale creature. I try to make them my own, and so before I start writing a book, like I did with A Pumpkin for Grubs or this book, or any ideas that I may have down the line, I like to spend a lot of time just kind of sketching and coming up with like how I want these creatures to look, like how their anatomy works and what colors I want them to be. Some of them come really easy, and some of them I have to spend like a lot more time on. In this book in particular, you'll notice we have Nessie, this character here. It's sort of my version of the Loch Ness Monster, and you can see one of my earlier sketches for Nessie right here, where I was working out how she needed to look. As you can tell, this one has sort of a bigger, more bulbous looking head, and I ended up with a little bit softer version in the book. I'm going to put that here. And I'm going to use the soft cover because it's a bit easier to hold. I'll show you some of the pictures in here. You can see the little bit gentler look I ended up going with. I ended up kind of embracing a slightly like bovine look, if you want to call it that. You can see like I have the ear. I wanted this almost more mammal looking creature. In my head, a lot of times when you see the Loch Ness Monster, it looks a bit more like a dinosaur, like a plesiosaur or something, which I definitely, you know, pulled into the design. As you can see here in this one, I definitely have those flippers going on, and I wanted this cool branching head, and I'll get to how I came up with that later. I feel like it's almost not fair to say I came up with it, because I'll explain how I got the idea. But I wanted these ears because I felt like it gave it this gentle, almost like farm animal look. I live on a farm, so like I'm around goats and cows and things like that. Horses, and that's where the ears came in. I felt like that just gave her such a gentle look, and also the big eyes were important to me. These big, gentle looking eyes with sort of the heavy lids. And I loved how that just took this creature that had the potential for looking a bit scary and just turned it into this very gentle, big pet feeling creature. I was very happy with the design for Nessie in the book. And originally, I was thinking of this creature as a he, and at the last minute, kind of fun fact, I changed the wording to be she. So Nessie's a girl. So the head, the way that the branches on the head are, this is really weird, but like I was one time taking a nap with my baby, and there was a towel hanging over I think the crib. There was a towel hanging up in our room for some reason. Like there was just, I think I had washed my hair and I just draped it. And there was a design on the towel, and it was a blue towel too. So, you know, blue. And I could see this creature in the towel, and it had this big, like massive roots coming up from its head. I could just picture this, and my imagination was running wild. And I took that and I sketched it in this other notebook. And this is the very first sketch I did of this Nessie creature. And you can tell it looks a bit more alien here. And I eventually took that design, made it softer and more friendly looking, and came up with the Nessie that ended up in the book. So I've talked about that one quite a bit, possibly because that's one of my favorite creatures from this book. Some of the other things that are in here is a pink octopus that shows up a few times. This is just a nod to the fact that my dad used to tell us stories that included like octopuses and giant squids a lot. Like if he was just telling a crazy story, like it would have sea creatures in it. And also there was a pink creature in one of those. It wasn't an octopus, it was a manta ray. So this pink octopus is a nod to my dad's stories that he always told us growing up. So that one didn't require a whole lot of like planning how I was going to make that, but that's just kind of a fun fact. Some of the other creatures in this book are a green unicorn, which it's on the front here. I gave it Pegasus wings on the front just because I felt like, I'm sorry, my allergies are kind of bothering me. I felt like that looked good on the cover, but he doesn't necessarily have wings in every picture either, and I felt like that was fine since dreams are pretty malleable, and all of the creatures in this story come from her dreams. So when I was doing this unicorn, I just wanted a unicorn that was not a normal horse color. And I feel like you see like white unicorns a lot, you see some pink ones, but for some reason I had the thought about the old manuscript Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which I don't actually know a ton about, but I do hear referenced. I know J.R.R. Tolkien did a translation of that story, and that stuck in my head, and somehow or another, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight made me think, well, wouldn't green look cool for this unicorn? And I was very happy. I put some pink and purple. Hey guys! Sorry. I put some pinks and purples into the mane, which you can see in some of these other ones, and it just worked great. And it ended up kind of becoming the color scheme for this book, because I ended up, after I decided to make the unicorn green, to do this green and pink quilt, which shows up all through the story and in kind of the climax of the story in sort of a different form. Let's see. Okay, so there's also fairies on the back of the book. Let me show you here. There's a little fairy that you can see here. These little guys are just popping up throughout the story. I just wanted a very whimsical look for these little guys. I feel like the lighting is not great today. I'm sorry about that. But they just pop up as these very loose, airy looking little creatures. And I didn't really have to work too hard with their design because I do sketch fairies a lot when I'm just sketching for fun. I draw a lot of horses too, so the unicorn wasn't too hard of a design for me. But yeah, I just wanted something that looked very light and fun. I ended up putting a lot of these little swirls on the wings, which I did like, and I thought looked good. Toward the end of the story, we sort of have the fairies swarming, which I think is kind of fun. They look a little bit like a angry nest of wasps or something, which I thought was a fun kind of way to subvert the idea of fancy cute fairies and bring in a little of the traditional fairies are not to be meddled with in the story. I really do like having both the gentler side of fairy tales, which is what kids expect today, with a little nod to the little bit more mischievous side of creatures that has been the norm up until, I guess, Disney. Like even A Pumpkin for Grubs kind of explores the idea of the traditional like brownie, but married to the Americanized garden gnome. That's kind of the way I think about that story, and there's definitely the mischievous pulled in, but really very heartwarming as well, which is kind of how I like to do all my books. I really like to focus on kind of warm family relationships. I want these to be books that you can really like have a comforting experience reading them. I don't want my books to be scary, but I do want them to maybe have like some parts of them that are like mild peril or problems that the main characters have to solve, which this book definitely has that aspect to it. Hannah Lee, as you might guess, after all these beautiful dreams, has like some scary dreams, and she has to deal with that, and her mom kind of comes and helps her to understand that we can overcome our fears. We can tell ourselves that we are stronger than what makes us afraid. And like, it's not in so many words, but when you read the story, you see that that's really what her mom is doing for her. She's helping her to understand that like we are bigger than our fears. We can tell ourselves what is true. We can tell ourselves stories about ourselves that are truer than our insecurities. I guess that's the deeper message. I haven't put it that way, but that's, you know, that's sort of the underlying message. There's not any like preaching in this book. Anyway, I kind of got rambling on. One of the most difficult designs in this book was the troll. And trolls were hard for me because I feel like there's not a real good consensus about what trolls look like. There's different versions of them too. There's like little mischievous trolls in Scandinavian folklore that, you know, are more like, they just are a little bit more like gnomes, if you can make that comparison. They're almost like little earth spirits. But then you also have, I think it's like the Jotunheim. No, that's not the right word. But the Jotun maybe is how you say it. There's like the mountain trolls. There are like a lot in between. Not like the one thing that I did find consensus on when I was trying to look up like what do trolls look like? What are traditional Scandinavian trolls looking like? They all have big noses. That was like the one thing. Even from the little ones to the mountain-sized ones, they have these big craggy noses and very rugged looking features. So I thought, okay, I'll focus in on that. And then I thought that like I would like my troll to be very like not mischievous coated, but a little bit more like scary coated, because he's a big one, the troll in my story. So I went ahead and did him green as sort of a nod to ogres and just other, I feel like a lot of like scary creatures like goblins and things are often colored green. So I went with a green brown coloring. And then I had to work with his anatomy for a while because I needed to know how he would move. And I ended up going with this very big crouching look. What I ended up trying to go with was like if a elf or a goblin or something was kind of mixed with a gorilla. I ended up leaning heavily on like how gorillas move to try to figure out how this guy would move. I've got some sketches here. Maybe I'll put the sketches on the screen. I had to play around a lot. I had these early ones that I think, sorry, I'm not the most prepared. But these were some very early prototypes, if you can see them, for the trolls. You can see this one was more upright, or maybe a little more cartoony looking. I did have like the fact that I wanted tusks on him, but I didn't really like that look. I felt like it looked maybe a little bit too generic. So I continued playing around with the design until I ended up with something that moved a lot more. Man, I've got a lot of... Okay, here we go. Here's another early design. Right here, you can tell I was also working on how to draw the main character, but he had an enormous nose here, and it was just too much. But I did love these ears. So you can tell I was continuing to work on like how he's going to move. I also started... I did the foot this way in this one, and that led to me thinking, oh, well, he can kind of walk on his toes a little bit more like how a gorilla walks. When you watch a gorilla, they have so much weight on the front of them, and they also tend to kind of have that foot peel up a little bit more than like a human does. And so I leaned pretty heavily into that. And then as I continued with I ended up with I started drawing him a little bit more hunched over. I still had that really too big nose. And then I finally ended up, I'm not finding the sketches here, but I ended up with what we see in the book, which is this, like I said, almost gorilla goblin. Here you can see an example of how I really leaned into like that forward movement. And then another picture. I had fun with like the sort of gnarly looking nostrils, the very just kind of oversized big forearms, which that kind of reminded me again of how I had to play around with creature design with Grubbs when I did that book, because I guess I'm going to pull it down. Grubbs doesn't have much of a body. He's very much just like big arms and boots. That's kind of how he is designed, and that took some getting used to be able to draw him where he was like moving and you could actually draw him with some motion. And I felt like the process I had to go through with learning to know how I could actually draw Grubbs in different positions was very much the process, very similar to the process for drawing the troll in this book. So yeah, that's a little bit about my process, you know, for designing the creatures and then getting them onto the page. Kind of like how my life or like stories from my childhood or other influences kind of work together to end up being what you see on the page. So yeah, as far as the design for the book, I really was going for a 32-page children's book when I first started, which is what I did for this one, and that is industry standard. So I like to challenge myself, even though, like, because I am not printing with a traditional press, I can make that a bit different. And so in this case, what I did different is I did stick to the story being 32 pages, which I think is a good way to make sure that your stories aren't getting too wordy or being too short. They make it where people, when they read the book, I think feel like they're having the traditional storybook experience. But I did add some end papers this time, which I'm very pleased with how those turned out. And I think that it was fun to kind of have them bleed into the first page of the book and just kind of support the text. It was very fun designing those. So this book is officially a few pages longer than 32 pages because I put end papers in, and I have a little acknowledgements page where I had the fun of drawing our family in storybook style in the end. I loved doing that. That was fun. And I'm very happy with that. I think it's okay that it ended up a little bit longer, technically speaking, but I do like to keep them to that industry standard just as a challenge to myself to keep the book from being too long or drawn out, keep that story concise where it's like just better storytelling. Let's see about some other fun facts or maybe like Easter eggs I could show you guys. One of the things about the book is that when she's dreaming, the pictures have this more soft look because I didn't use any pen detailing. And when she's awake, we have a little bit more of a crisp look because I use more pen for details in those pictures. And I thought that that was kind of a cool thing to do. And the one exception is when she has her bad dream. That picture is a little bit more crisp. It's not as crisp as real life, but I used some darker colors on that so that it gave that, oh no, I had a bad dream and it's almost too real. And that was kind of a fun challenge. So, something that's just in the book and I think adds to the atmosphere. There's actually a couple of nods to our favorite little garden gnome. He comes in at the end. He's not like written into the story, but he's there in the illustrations, which I think will be fun for people who read the first book, and was certainly fun for me to kind of put that in there. Show you was that I also was able to put my logo on this time around, which was very fun. It makes me feel more professional. And the size difference between the two editions, the hardback is available on Lulu Bookstore, and the softcover is available through Amazon. My thought process there is that Amazon doesn't offer hardcovers for books until they're like 70 pages long, or 75, which is kind of a shame because children's books, really, it's nice to have a hardcover because they do hold up better. So I really wanted that to be an option this time around, and I was able to, I looked through like a lot of different bookstores and stuff, and Lulu was really one of the most seamless ones as far as being able to offer and just have a direct link to a print-on-demand hardback. I'm really pleased with the quality too. The paper in this one is quite a bit thicker and has a really nice finish. And it's wonderful being able to see the pictures at this size. I think you can appreciate them so much this way. And it's got this very nice soft touch cover, which I also did do soft touch like matte cover for this, and I like the way it feels too, and I think it's a bit more durable than the glossies. I went with glossy with my last book because I felt like it helped the colors pop a little bit. In this case, I think with the lighter colored cover, they look great and it feels nice in your hands. I also like this size for like being able to travel with it, be able to tuck it in a bag or something, and it is nice having it as a soft cover, a little smaller, because it keeps the book from being overly floppy, and you can just easily see that whole picture. And I was also really pleased with the quality. I felt like pictures came out very crisp, for even though they are smaller. And the black and white ones look great. I'm really pleased with those. Let's see if I can find another one. I feel like they just came out very clear. I'm loving both editions. If you guys want to purchase either of these, I will leave the links in the description. And thanks so much for just being with me for a rambly video today. It's a little different than what I usually do. I'm going to be back with another video of children's book recommendations, probably in a couple of days, maybe next week. I have a busy weekend. And this time I went yard sailing last week. I went yard sailing not long ago, and I found like a good handful of books, and I felt like a lot of them were really nice. Ones I'd either seen before and had been looking for our collection, or ones I'd never seen before but I felt like would be fun to share with you guys. And I thought that maybe we'd do sort of a haul, and I could show you what I got and how much I spent on it, which is kind of fun. And I guess I'm done. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for being here, and bye!